Why do we not see the miracles today that we read about in the Bible, especially in the book of Acts, when Jesus listed several things like when you lay hands on the sick, they will recover, people will be delivered from demons. He said that these things should follow those that believe.
Why don't we see those miracles today? The answer is not a simple one because, we could say, why don't we see churches living communally like they did in Acts chapter 2 today? A lot of that has to do with different circumstances. Some of it has to do with a lack of obedience or faith in modern Christians. I mean, there's more factors than one involved. There are miracles that are happening today. We don't see them very often, of course. And some of the ones that we probably could see, we don't, because we don't recognize miracles. We give them other names. For example, you mentioned demon possession. If a person manifests demonic possession today, the average person who has a naturalistic worldview is not going to recognize that as demon possession. They'll call it something else. They'll call it, schizophrenia or something like that, and therefore they haven't seen it. There's something supernatural happening in front of their eyes, but they don't recognize it because their worldview doesn't allow that category, and so they don't see it. Likewise, many times people are healed of diseases they shouldn't have recovered from. But a person who doesn't believe in God or miracles is going to give some kind of a natural explanation that the cancer is in remission, spontaneous remission, or something like that. There's many amazing, unexpected, medically inexplicable recoveries from sickness in our time, many of which could be said to be answers to prayer and therefore miraculous. Although, again, one has to have in their worldview a category that allows for there to be the supernatural. So I think there are miracles seen today. I just think that we've been conditioned not to call them miracles or to doubt that they're miracles, as long as any kind of natural explanation can be supplied for them. Then I would also say this, that miracles in the Bible usually accompany the forward edge of the kingdom advance. That is, when the apostles are going into new territory, when they're breaking new ground, when they're in pristine mission fields where nobody knows who God is. The miracles are there to show that there is a God, that he is backing up these people who are preaching this message, and therefore the heathen should listen to the message. They see that the miracles give some kind of credentials to the preachers and that their message is of divine origin. So we read in the last verse of the Gospel of Mark, it says the apostles, whenever were preaching the gospel, the Lord working with them with signs following. That is, God confirmed the word with signs following, it says. God was working with them. But that doesn't mean that once the churches have been established in an area, that miracles proliferated at the same rate. Once you have a church, once you have believers, there are other evidences in the believing community that provide the proof of the supernatural evidence, origins of the gospel. For example, Jesus said, he prayed in John 17, I pray, Father, that they may be one, so that the world may know that you sent me. In other words, the oneness or the relationships of the Christians should be such that it convinces the world this has got to be supernatural. Now, I have to admit, people in churches today aren't all Christians, and the ones who are not very well discipled. And therefore, that love, which is supernatural, which is, in a sense, inexplicable by natural terms, is not always in evidence. So we've got some problems there. One of the reasons we're not seeing miraculous transformations of life, miraculous love for one's enemies, as Stephen, for example, who was stoned to death, said, Father, do not lay this sin to their charge. Or Jesus, when he was dying, said, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. We see this kind of total love, unconditional, for one's enemies. That's supernatural. But unfortunately, we don't see that much of that supernatural love in the churches today. I'm sure that every church has some people in whom you could find that. But the early church was a community of people who all exhibited that. Jesus said, this is how men will know that you're my disciples, that you have love for one another. That's supernatural. That's a supernatural thing. That's a miracle. There are many kinds of miracles. A healing of a sick person, the casting of a demon out, turning water into wine. These are miracles indeed, but so is the transformation of a heart that's hard to a heart that's loving and soft. People who hate each other into a community of people who'd lay their lives down for each other. These are miraculous transformations, far more important, by the way, in the grand scheme of things, than that of healing a sickness. And therefore, the whole life of the Christian community is supposed to be something of a miracle. And the sort of the showcase miracles that you read of in the Bible, accompanying the preaching of the gospel in new territories, I think those are there in the absence of a believing community to give supernatural attestation to the message. Once there's a believing community planted, that community itself is supposed to be the supernatural attestation. Now that doesn't mean God can't do any other of the spectacular miracles of other kinds. He can do this whenever he wants to, but he's not obligated to. It's not necessarily normative. Sometimes people think, well, if I just had enough faith, I should get a miracle every time I want one, because you'll have what you say. Well, that's a form of teaching that is not really biblical or balanced, but many Christians have been taught it. The truth is that miracles are not at our beck and call. If they were, of course, we'd have one every time we have a problem. If we could just call God to do a miracle at our whim, there'd be no more need to consider natural laws. I could just jump off a pinnacle of a temple and expect the angels to keep me from getting hurt. I could drive at 1,000 miles an hour if I had a car fast enough on the freeway and just expect God to, cause the car to leap over the other traffic and not have any accidents. Obviously, crazy things would be expected if we had the power that God does. If God was like a genie in a lamp, we could magically have whatever we want supernatural from him, that would put us into a different world that's not this world. It's not the world God created. It's not the world that God has us living in.